we, Jim?
30-year anniversary.
80 years. So, Justin, do you have anything for us?
I do.
Okay.
So, John, at this point, I will start with you. This was an interesting period for you in your career. Can you talk about what led to Christine in the wake of The Thing, which was your picture right before this?
I had made a movie called The Thing, which came out in December of '82 and bombed and was hated by everybody. So I couldn't get a job. I was actually fired from a job. And I was unemployed. So I was looking around for something, and this producer that I knew said, well, there's this brand new Stephen King book about a haunted car called Christine. So since I needed a job, I said, yes, I'm interested.
And what did you think of the script when you first read it? I know that you...
Well, I worked on the script with Bill Phillips, a friend of mine, who's a really talented writer. And what we did was we changed it a little bit from the book. The book had the kind of ghost or corpse of the former owner sitting in the back seat making wisecracks. Maybe I should have kept that, but I thought, nah, I don't want to do that. So we just made it basically a straightforward haunted car movie. And I was really interested in the characters, in these bums here sitting on the stage, but also our leads, Keith Gordon and John Stockwell and Alexander Paul. And they were terrific. And the legendary Harry Dean Stanton was in it, so it was a lot of fun.
And you, despite the fact that you're in a band called the Coupe de Villes, weren't really a car guy, right?
No.
The vehicles in the film are obviously it's the focal point of the whole picture. Can you talk to begin with here? I know that we have the owner, Bill Gibson, down there on the end of Christine. If everybody here hasn't seen Christine yet, she's in the back of the hall over here, and she's absolutely gorgeous. The cars in the picture to begin with, how many vehicles do you remember having, and can you talk a little bit about working with those things?
I don't remember the exact number, but it was several. We had different kinds.
21.
21? Jeez. The man right here. The man. We had 21 cars, according to Bill. Some of them were simply just, they were all cherried out. Some of them were just to drive from here to there. Some of them were souped up for stunts. And one of them we had to burn over and over again. And that was a tough scene. Because we had a fake gas station filled with napalm, I think, ready to blow. We had Terry Leonard, the stuntman, all in this fire outfit. We set it on fire, but the problem is, because of the heat, the engine wouldn't turn over, so we couldn't drive the car out of there. I don't remember what they did, but finally out it comes. It chases poor Bill down the highway. He's running for his life. Really wasn't scary though at all. He was way ahead of the car. You know how actors are.
Bill, tell the real story.
Well, the real story about that part anyway was I said to John at one point before we did this, I enjoyed working with John because I would go to him before a scene and say, John, I think this is A, B, or C. Which one do you think? And John, in his typical economy, would say, I like B. I said, okay, let's go with that. So we tried that, and I said to him before this one scene where we're running down the road, I said, John, why does Buddy Repperton run right down the middle of the road? And John said, because it's a movie.
And how close were you actually to that truck, the rig?
Well, obviously I wasn't close to the car at all, which was pretty amazing. I remember Terry Leonard telling me that he couldn't actually see out the windshield he was driving. I think the car was painted in rubber cement, wasn't it?
Yep.
Rubber cement that they painted it in, and he had to get it going and aim and go right over top a couple of those gas, what do you call them?
Gas bombs, yeah.
Gas bombs, and then head off down the road, which was not an easy thing for him to do. And of course, then to take that shot, they put all the cameras on the front of a camera car, which I think was like approximately a 1-ton dually with all these things mounted in front, so that John, the director of photography, could sit up front to watch what they were doing. And then, of course, they had me run about 3 miles, it seemed like, down the road at as fast a pace as I could. And when John called cut, the cameraman had the responsibility of not throwing everybody off the truck by immediately braking, and I had to slow down. Unfortunately, those two masses took different amounts of time to slow down, and I remember my heels hitting the back of that truck as I was running forward. So I nearly did get run over, as Buddy referenced.
You know what was awesome? Do you guys remember showing up to that set? First of all, I thought we showed up to a gas station. It was a gas station for all intents and purposes. Even inside the set gas station were old cans and cobwebs and oil stains, and we were walking around and waiting for the setup, waiting for action. And John, do you remember this? Everybody's kind of like, it's a lot of waiting, we're setting up, and all of a sudden, this little roadster pulls off the highway to get gas. And this was not a gas station, this was a set. That's how realistic this thing was.
And you had an adventure there too, for your scene there at the gas station. Can you tell the story behind that? Another harrowing kind of...
Yeah, that was... Well, I was so thankful that John allowed this. This is the scene where Christine pushes our Camaro right into me, my death scene, and they had the stunt double on the set, but I don't know what got into me, but I was like, John, I want to do this. And John, being John, he's like, fuck yeah. So my stunt guy's off to the side, and basically, I shouldn't open my mouth so quickly, because what happened was they bring this pad in, and John says, here's what's going to happen. I got this camera rig behind a piece of the Camaro, and these guys, these big set guys, are going to push this thing with the camera on it, this piece of the Camaro, and they're going to push it as fast as they can right at you. What I want you to do is, at the very last second, I mean the very last second, I want you to fall straight back, and we're going to go right over you. And I'm like, God, why did I volunteer for this? And I'm finding my manhood to do this thing. And basically, we did it. I mean, this car, I actually felt it kind of touch my pant leg as I was rolling back. And I'd never done a stunt before, but it was like 20 cups of coffee after. I was buzzed.
What a wimp. He's lying. There was no danger. There was nothing. I could have done it.
I actually think the Moochie death scene, John, was a lot more harrowing than the Richie death scene.
But here we go.
Mr. Malcolm Denard.
The interesting thing about this movie is that not all my cast members got along. There's a little bit of conflict
What?
between these two here.
Well, no, it's just weird because it's like, to me, it's like for Steve and I to be up on stage because we didn't really get along that well, so we didn't really get along right now.
The first day I went up to him and I said, hey, fat boy.
Well,
And ever since
and
that,
then I see, he starts again. It's like total bullshit. Oh, it's what?
you know, you're 5 pounds skinnier. It's 30 years later. I said it again 30 years later. I said, hey, fat boy.
Yeah, and you look like you're about 65 years old.
All right, fine, whatever. I'm glad there's
you know what?
something in between us.
We're joking. We're joking.
We're good friends.
We're friends. We're neighbors.
Let's talk about your death scene, actually. That's one of the most elaborate ones in the film, you bum.
It was incredible, actually. What was interesting was I was the only person on the set for about 4 or 5 days, and I said to Carpenter, everything I wanted to happen was already going to happen. So I said, hey, John, do you think when I'm in the middle of the street and Christine's lights go like this? And he goes, yeah, Malcolm, they're already going to do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I run down the street. I go, do you think I should jump over a thing? He goes, yeah, Malcolm, we're going to do that. So I was trying to direct, and I shouldn't.
Malcolm couldn't hit his mark in this movie. Take after take. A mark is where you have to go for the camera. Focus, be framed correctly, and he's way away from it. It's a sandbag with a T mark on it. Anybody can see it. He cannot see it. He cannot find it. He steps over it. He misses it. If you look at the movie, you'll see him looking for it.
I actually go, run. Okay. Thanks, Julie.
My pleasure.
Talk about Malcolm, the setup for that scene though, where you end up getting crushed in that bay. You have described that as the most horrifying sound you've ever heard. Can you talk about the symphony that led to that?
It was horrifying. It was. He's looking at me, going, "Oh," shaking his head now. I'm telling you, I actually had to go into a loading dock. Now, hold on. I gotta explain this because I'm in this loading dock and there is a bulldozer behind me, pulling the actual pristine car through my legs. It is going through my legs. So it's actually, when the car comes crunching through the two walls, it's actually coming towards me. There's nothing there to stop it from cutting me in half.
What are you talking about? Why is the bulldozer there, Malcolm? Because the walls are reinforced, aren't they, Malcolm?
Yes,
The car cannot come through the walls, can they? You're as safe as a little baby, aren't you?
Big baby.
Man, you cannot hire actors like that.
It's a method thing that I go through. He's not.
So, you have the tractor pulling the car towards you, and the sound of the car is actually revving and going nuts as well.
It was unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable, and the noise that it made crunching through this thing was outrageous. But I've had so many people come up to me and say to me today, "Well, why didn't you just jump on the roof and run over the car?" And I said, "Well, that's because I couldn't, because the script wasn't written like that."
It's a movie. The cars were famous for having problems with their transmission. These push button torque-like things. Can you talk about dealing with all that on set, John? Because for you to break the momentum like that must have been frustrating.
Well, these things had to be babied because they were old. And this is, what was it, 1958, I think it was. So they were carried up, refurbished, but they were old. And in the old days, they made some great cars, but some of those cars had these stupid push-button controls. And these things were constantly breaking down. The hydraulics were breaking. It was a nightmare. They worked a little bit better than my actors did, though. But I'm just teasing.
They actually had a workshop built into the factory on one end of it where they were just working on these vehicles the whole time. And there were just, some of them were hindquarters, some of them were just the front, some of them had rubber doors and all. It's really interesting. And in the new issue of HorrorHound, there's an article about the graveyard where they all ended up, this wrecking yard where there were like piles of cars. It's amazing to see. And there's some photos in there of that too. So throughout the production, dealing with the car breaking down, John, I understand you brought a lot of levity to set. I've heard stories of you with your lighter under people's seats, of you unplugging stuff from the sound guys.
Yeah. I was a practical joker in those days. What I would do before a take, I perfected it on Starman. After the movie, after Christine, I would be having a big take going. And when you're fixing the lighting and waiting for the lighting, everybody's sitting around, talking, having a good time. So I snuck under all the chairs, and under all the wiring, and unplugged the sound card. So that what they were listening to, there was nothing there. And then snuck quietly back, and they're not paying attention. And so I'd roll it and watch these guys panic like nobody's business. Hands flying. Oh, that was great. We would light, if you go up to somebody in a canvas chair and you take a lighter and you light their butt, right? Just for 2 or 3 seconds, then walk away. It takes 2 or 3 seconds to come through and they'll jump. But you'll be walking the other way.
There were so many big gliders on that set.
Oh, yeah.
Well, another thing John did that he didn't tell you about was we created this fictional stalker on the set that only the producer was not in on the joke. Everybody else did. So there would be I don't know, what is he, a crew guy or something like that dressed up like a gang member. And then every once in a while he would make this very timely appearance just as Richard Kobritz came around the corner. He'd be the only guy that see them. And John played this joke on him for the whole show. Right?
We did, and we had the cops in on it. So the police who were with us would come up and start in a conversation with me, and Cobras would be sitting there. It's like, we have a lot of gang activity around here, and they start really pumping. All he fell for it, like nobody's business.
There was one more practical joke that John did. I got to let John talk and say it because it was done to Larry Franco, and it was
You tell him no.
Okay, it's an amazing practical joke. Larry Franco drove a Porsche, and whenever he would come to the set, he was very vain about his Porsche, so he would put a car cover over it. And John let the whole cast and crew know, except Larry, that he basically put another car in place of the Porsche, and he put the car cover over it, and
Oh, we got a bulldozer to come out and crash into it.
Speaking of car destruction, we'll get to more bulldozer hot action later. And I'll let you describe that scene how you like to. But the scene right before the show me, where you guys are destroying the car, I think all three of you have some great stories about that, and John as well. Could you guys talk about that?
Well, it was easy for me. I just told him to go in there and beat the shit out of his car. But how long? I don't remember how long.
10 minutes.
And you can talk about what it's like.
Okay, John says, okay guys, there's about 3 cameras that are gonna roll, and beat the shit out of the car. Just take sledgehammers, do whatever you want, and Bill, the smart one, Steve, the smart one, they all put gloves on, and I forgot to put my gloves on. So when he yelled action, we have to wait for King Bill to get up on the car and take this sledgehammer and then pound it, and then next thing you know, then we all go. Well, because I didn't have gloves on, I went to hit the window with this sledgehammer, and all this glass went in between my hands and the sledgehammer. So when I hit it the second time, it was like, it was crazy in my hands. Well, you couldn't cut. We could not cut. So we got this. I got this other hammer and started pounding on the car. After the take was done, my hands were covered in blood. Wow. It was crazy.
You can see that in the film too. When he takes a swing at the window and it breaks, he kind of goes, yeah. It's absolutely visible in there.
Knucklehead.
Probably one of the most common questions that people ask me is was it hard for you to destroy that car? Of course, the answer is no. But one of the reasons is in a practical sense, since this was 1983 when we were making this, is a 1958 car, so it was just kind of an old car. It wasn't a classic car for a lot of us at that time.
Like the Camaro that we had.
Yeah, like the Camaro was a classic car. That was sort of accessible, but a 58 Plymouth Fury. I had the good fortune of talking to Stephen King about that car once about why he chose that, and he had told me that it was an oddball car. They only made 5,000 of them, and he sort of felt like an oddball himself in high school, so he sort of had he felt association with that car. The push-button transmission didn't work really well, like John said. There's lots of things about it that were a bit strange. Yet at the same time, it was a 350 V8 with 2 4-barrel carbs. It could do 140 miles an hour. So it was kind of an unusual car, and I never thought twice about it. I mean, how many of you, if you get a chance to take a sledgehammer to something of value, and say, go for it? So I had a great time doing it, and the only thing that was difficult for me was they had this car finely waxed and cleaned for the film, and when I jumped down, it was wet and nearly came out of my ass.
You see that? Yeah. The mayhem. It was not choreographed real well.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much.
I mean, we were near each other's, flying instruments, and people were just tackling different parts of the car, and it was just pretty much balls out frenzy, man. It was really, really intense, and it was for a long while. And we were doing all kinds of things. There were things I did that I don't think ended up in the cut. I think I peed in the gas tank. But we really
Well, we had maybe 10 minutes, I think, or something.
Yeah.
We about 10 minutes where we wailed on his car, but and kind of made me feel bad. At the other end of that, John says we actually need to do more damage to it, and I think the stunt guys or the crew then beat the car up even more after we were gone.
Yeah.
And for those of you that work on cars, that car was fixed back up again because they were down just a few of them, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that car was resurrected amazingly in just a few days.
You're listening to these actors, not Bill, these actors over here, talk about how dangerous this whole project was. This is the most amazing amount of wimpage I've ever had. Well, you don't hear Bill complaining, do you? He had to get up on the car. These guys are standing beside the car.
Well, I was upset because I actually got to take a dump on the car, and that was cut out of the film.
It was a little bit dangerous. It was a little dangerous. I was a little worried about it. But that's why we put 10-minute magazines in there and just told them to go. And if they hurt themselves, we could cast someone else. Sorry.
John, I think that Keith Gordon's performance in this has become one of the defining roles for him. And so many people are familiar with his film work as a filmmaker now, too. Keith talks a lot about you influencing him on set, how open you were to working with him.
He does?
That's what he said.
No, that's nice.
Could be photographed.
Keith's a very talented director. He was a very, very talented actor. And he brought it every day.
Yeah, it was really hard for me. I got to know Keith. He's like the nicest guy walking the planet. He's so bloody nice. And we had to just be like disdainful and just, like he was a piece of crap. And it's so, it was harder to be mean to him than it was to beat up the car.
The first day of, we were doing the shot at in this place called Canoga Park High School, and it was the shop scene with Buddy and Moochie and Richie kind of really picking on Arnie. And John says to Stephen and I and Bill before the take, pick on Keith a little bit, just pick on him a little bit. So I kind of took it a little too far because of my method of acting, John. And so I kind of took it a little too far, and Keith went over to John and said, John, can you have Malcolm not do that? And John came over to me and said, Malcolm, can you do it more?
Bill, can you talk about that scene? You actually, one of your moments in that has become one of your taglines when people come up to you at conventions.
You little bald fuck, fuck!
Yeah, that's right behind that.
Well, I actually had to question John about that one myself because that's not how it was scripted nor how I performed it. But if any of you have ever made a film or have watched films being made, you know that there are, the master shots and then there are close-ups. And as a courtesy to your fellow actor, when you're helping them with their close-up, you stand right next to the camera and you feed them their lines, and hopefully you give a performance level, work. And in that case, I was standing next to the camera when they were working with Mr. Spielberg. Yeah, Spielberg. And it came time for my line, so I said, yeah, try it, and I'll throw you through the wall, you little bald fuck. And I went like that, sort of out of emphasis, and my head came on the lens. And John had told me later when I saw it in the film, I went, that's not the way I did it. And he said that, I like that take. So he kept that in, so it was sort of artificially cut in, fuck. But it seems to work, so John was obviously smarter than I was.
We alluded earlier to Caterpillar tractor action. John, that last scene where the car is actually destroyed was a pretty intense and intricate situation. Can you talk about making that happen and the mounting of the fear?
we had a lot of time to shoot that last scene because we had a little extra shooting time. And I boarded this whole scene out, so I kind of knew what I wanted. A lot of it was the build up to the final confrontation between the bulldozer and Christine. And I had no idea what was going to happen. And the night we shot the final scene, this bulldozer just crawls right up and crushes this car. It was sensational. Rear entry, you know what I'm saying? Fabulous. So I thought this is it. But it's not something that you can plan for exactly. You just have to see what happens.
And the getting the bulldozer on top of the car properly didn't work the first time, right? As you went up there, you had to.
No, but I remember it went right up there.
Yeah.
Right up. But my memory's not good.
Yeah. Well, so this is what John told me about 2 years ago on the film. That the first time he got the bulldozer up there, it went over the side and it only ran over part of it, and so they actually had to rig up the car as well to do some additional things like the lights coming on and the smoke coming out of it and stuff like that. And so you had it up again, and this is what you referred to as the butt scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, if I said that, it's
There it is. Gospel. So at this point, we have some time left here. I want to know if anybody has any questions for anybody here. Yes. Yep.
Mr. Carpenter, you have touched on so many different genres with your work, like, I guess within the genre, like monsters, ghosts, even like Asian supernatural stuff. Does that reflect your kind of personal taste, or are you just more drawn to individual projects, scripts, and stories?
Well, I got in this business to make westerns. They didn't make westerns anymore. So I made this movie called Halloween, and it was successful, and it got typecast as a horror director. Now, I grew up loving horror. So I was happy to make horror movies, and it gave me a career. But I would go for the script, okay? That's the story is the most important thing. You are welcome.
And when you were a kid, John, you actually made sci-fi movies, right? You would do your knockoffs of your...
Yes, let's don't talk about that.
Okay. They don't exist. Red hat.
The Ward, I was telling Mr. Carpenter, The Ward was the best movie I saw in a while.
Thank you.
And I was going to ask you about the kid in the institution that was based Mike Myers on.
I'm not quite sure I heard what you said.
The kid in the mental institution was based Michael Myers on. Was based on Michael Myers.
Which kid in which mental institution? What are you talking about?
I've heard that somewhere, based Michael Myers on.
Oh, is Michael Myers based on a real kid?
No. There's this guy. When I was in college in Bowling Green, Kentucky, going to college, before I went to USC, before I went to Hollywood, part of my class visited a mental institution. And I saw that we walked the wards just to see. And I saw this kid who was the most frightening expression I've ever seen. So that was the real person. He was not Michael Myers.
Right over here, yes.
And I don't blame you.
Yep.
I don't blame you.
Mr. John Carpenter,
Yeah.
Can you talk about where your Western influence comes from, where your love for those movies come from? And,
Westerns?
Yeah, where's your love for Westerns come from, and if you have any future plans to include that in other movies?
Well, I'd love to make a Western, but you know, the Westerns are the American myth. They're our own myth. They're the Wild West tales. We didn't have King Arthur. We didn't have... Our folk tales are really Westerns. And I grew up with them. I grew up watching them and loving them. But about around the time of the 60s, Sergio Leone and the Clint Eastwood spaghetti Westerns, that kind of did it all in. Then there's not much you can do after that. They were stylized. So we probably need another big star to come along and rescue.
And Vampires is kind of a Western too. I mean, in a way. I think that's another film that is very Western influenced. Yeah.
I wanted to know what you think about the remix of the Halloween movie.
No comment.
Yes, black hair. Go ahead. Yep, you.
I know that you stated that Halloween has been an influence for you. Was there any particular movie or anything that he did that maybe influenced you on Christine specifically?
Oh, on Christine? No.
No? Okay.
That's all horrible.
Anything else that you did, like maybe specifically in the 80s, that you would point to, other than the thing, because I mean, Thing from Another World, which is, aside from that, maybe like Big Trouble in Little China or in Prince of Darkness, even something like that?
And his influence on me was, this was a director who had this enormous career, and every movie he made, whether it was in Hollywood with which star, didn't matter. It was a personal film to him, and that was where I got my inspiration. He's not a filmmaker that when you watch him, you don't see these crazy, great angles. He's not a show-off filmmaker. Very simple style. But he's made some of the greatest movies I've ever seen. So that's how he influenced me. Young man. To remake The Thing. From the original, they asked me to make it. I didn't want to make it. I was scared of it because I love the original so much. I'm talking about 1952, Thing from Another World. It's a great film. But once I got involved in it, and I thought of going back to the original novella, Who Goes There? And reading that again, the blood test scene made me decide I have to do this movie. All right, anybody else have any questions?
Mr. Carpenter, you have such a huge library of films that I think all of us love so much. From your opinion, what are you going to do if you love
Well, I don't like any of them. I can't watch my own movies. I sit and watch 10 minutes and I say, what was he thinking? What was I doing? Why didn't I shoot it that way? That's terrible. Where's the pace? Hurry up. Let's go. I'm a little too self-critical. I don't need to see it. And I care about all of my time.
We do one more guy in the hat. Yep.
Mr. Carpenter, you got a lot of movies with Kurt Russell. Is there any chance of a future movie, like another Escape or?
Future movies with Kurt Russell.
Maybe, but now the rumors are that they're going to remake Escape from New York. I'm telling you. However, there is good news. If they do that, they have to deposit a check. Thank you guys so much.